Hey there, welcome. Stan Visnick here, Release Muscle Therapy, and in today's video I am going to be reviewing the Core Coach, which is a abdominal based or focused training tool, and I'm going to be walking you through not only the tool itself but what the application for the tool actually is, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're chatting about the Core Coach. And so this tool has been around for a little while. I have just recently came across it. Just a big overview here, what we're doing with this kind of a tool. The Core Coach is meant to give you visual feedback for how your spine is moving when you're doing certain types of exercises. Now, this is not a new concept. This concept had come out, I think, in the mid to late 90s. There was a book about it that was written in the physical therapy literature that had a lot of research that had been done showing and demonstrating that there was changes or alterations in muscle firing and timing patterns when individuals had low back pain. So the idea was that by retraining or conditioning these muscles, that it would assist with reducing low back pain, improving stability, and so forth. So there were tools that were used for this. Early on, I was introduced to this about 20 years ago. And for many years, I used just a regular blood pressure cuff. And you would put the cuff underneath the lower back. But the challenge was, of course, with that tool that you had to buy a lot of extension hoses and all this other kind of additional parts and put it together so that you can get it to work really well. So it became a little bit laborious, so we kind of dropped it and was using different tools. So this is a new kid on the block, this idea, and they had recreated this idea with a longer extension hose. Everything is put in together with a few extra bells and whistles. So here's the main idea. The main idea is that the curvature underneath the spine is hard to sense when you are moving it around and to what degree. So what we would do is we would stick this bladder, air bladder, underneath the lumbar curvature at a certain point, usually at about L3, so that when you were to actually push your spine down through two combinations of motions, either rolling the pelvis back or exhaling the ribs down, the spine, as it would push down on that bladder, would cause changes in the readings on the cuff. And we could measure how much movement was happening or how aggressive you were with that by the dial moving around, and also your ability to hold that position while you did various movements. So this is very, very helpful when we're talking about improving what we call motor control and getting visual feedback on being able to hold certain body parts still, namely the spine, while you're moving your extremities. So very, very cool to do this, and a lot of people gain a lot of awareness of how much their spine is wobbling around when they're doing certain movements, and also times in certain types of spinal conditions, for example, that individuals may not be able to tolerate a lot of movement, and when they're doing certain exercises say, well, this exercise gives me pain, when really it shouldn't. And then when we use the bladder or we stick that underneath the spine, we can measure how much spinal movement, and of course a lot of people experience less pain when they're doing their activities, when they're getting feedback and saying, wow, I didn't know my spine was moving that much when I was doing this exercise, and as long as I keep that dial on a certain reading, then I feel good. So it's a really, really good tool for that. So specifically, this can be used in the lumbar spine, obviously, and it can also be used in the cervical spine. So because essentially you can think about this movement of the neck like a crunch, very similar to what we would do in the abdominal region down here for the lower lumbar spine. So the cool thing about the Core Coach is, again, the assembly, we have a much longer tubing. Now this, you might think, so what? But when you get a normal blood pressure cuff, the tube is not this long, it's very short. So one of the main problems is when you stick it underneath your low back, your head is kind of like this, trying to look at the dial. So it's very straining for the eyes and sometimes for the neck to be able to hold your head like that while you're doing the exercise. So again, we used to have to order an extra tube, and it was a big hassle to try to assemble all of this, because you also have to get a little insert to get the tubes to connect. So it was a bit of a pain. So that's one issue. The second issue, of course, with this is that the bladder, depending on how many chambers you have, The old school blood pressure cuff, we used to have to roll it up a good amount and then it would shift around depending on the Velcro, so that was kind of a pain. The Core Coach actually has 3 sections. It has a middle section and the 2. When the bladder is like this, it distributes the air a little bit better and we get better readings without so much frustration. Another component here which is nice about this is that it's already labeled, and I'll give you a close-up of this, of the dial. So the dial clearly designates where you want to pump the dial up to start, and of course where the holding position is. So when you do the exercise, there's no guesstimating on exactly how much pressure you want. Typically the research says that we would start somewhere around 40 millimeters of mercury and then increase it by 30. There is some variation on this depending upon what you're trying to do. So obviously you would work one-on-one with your therapist or your movement coach to determine the best thing for you. So the other part when we're talking about the cervical spine, that this solves a specific problem is, again, the unraveling of the bladder or getting it situated just correctly. So the Core Coach has this nice little sleeve that goes with it. It's called, the neck coach. So essentially what you would do is you would fold this guy up here, this bladder, and you would slide it in the sleeve. Now when you slide it in the sleeve, it keeps it contained so that when you pump it up, it doesn't move too much around and you don't have to deal with the bladder unraveling. So again, when you try this with a blood pressure cuff or some of those other tools out there, these are some of the challenges that you have when you're trying to just pump the cuff up and do the exercise. This solves that problem just simply with a little sleeve here. I think that's brilliant. Now there's another benefit here to using the Core Coach. It does come with a belt. So what they had figured out here is, again, more unraveling issues and just making it faster to get this thing set up and going, is that you can slide the bladder inside of this belt, okay, and then you put the belt around your waist and then just cinch it in. And that way it stops it from moving around so much, okay? So again, a lot of the issues, clearly the people who had designed the Core Coach had been tinkering with the blood pressure cuff and had problem solved their way through all of that to make this easily accessible. So these 2 items in particular are pretty awesome additions, so that's cool. And it comes with a little carrying case and so forth, which all these products do, which is very nice to have as well to take care of your equipment, okay? So just as a quick primer, so what I would do with this is, with the Core Coach, you slide that underneath the back and you can see that pressure point right there. Typically we're going to be putting that directly underneath L3. L3 is umbilical level, and that is the area which is a nice balance between the bottom and the top. Now let me explain this real quick. When you're doing this exercise, there's a couple of ways that we want to do this for maximum effect, and I will make an additional video on this. But number 1 is to roll the pelvis backward. So when we roll the pelvis backward, the intention is to use the abdominal musculature, namely the internal obliques if possible, to roll the pelvis back. So we're not squeezing our glutes or pushing with our feet, we're trying to roll the pelvis back, and that will start to flatten L5, L4, up to L3. Now, that is one portion of it. Some people with a lot of extension in the curve, they will also need to perform an exhalation. So as we exhale the air out of our ribs, okay, or our lungs, our ribs will move downward via the contraction of the abdominals in order to expel air out of our lungs. As we do that, there will be an increase in lumbar flexion that is bringing that spine downward on the exhalation. So there's a pelvic tilt and an exhalation occurring to push that lumbar spine down. Now what should happen during that, by the activation of the deep abdominal musculature, the dial should go up to the ideal range, roughly 30 millimeters of mercury. At that point, we would sustain that, and that would be at the hold position there. We would maintain that contraction and then resume normal inhalation, exhalation, normal breathing. We should be able to keep that dial at that point and breathe without that dial going all over the place. As some people are unable to maintain or to sustain that exhalation or that ideal position while they breathe, because as they're inhaling, they're going into extension, losing pelvic control, etc. So the idea is to be able to hold that position And then as we learn how to hold that while just breathing, which is highly beneficial for a lot of people, we start to challenge it with moving extremities. And you'll see this in the program. The core coach has some additional exercises and recommendations for that. But simply imagine learning how to hold that position, and then, for example, lifting one leg up and down while not having that dial going all over the place. Okay? That is showing your ability to master holding that position while respirating, while moving an extremity. There's a variety of things you can do. You can lift and lower the leg. You can lift both legs at the same time. You can move arms and do a variety of different activities to maintain your ability or maintain the position of the rib cage and the pelvis to neutralize the lumbar curve. Now, in no way am I saying that by doing this activity, it's going to resolve all your problems if you have back pain and so forth, but certainly being able to learn how to use these muscles and also be able to identify the inability to sustain contractions, and you might be quite a bit more sensitive to certain movements if you don't do that. It is a very, very valuable tool, and that's why I'm doing this review here. So, and when it comes down to the core coach and my recommendation, I highly recommend it. Okay, I use it for a lot of my clients, especially in the beginning of the programs as we're trying to teach them how to control the things that are occurring here in terms of movement in the pelvis and the ribs. And some people will love to use this tool in the long run as part of their abdominal and core conditioning programs. So it is a fairly economical tool. I highly recommend it, especially if you're dealing with challenges with lumbar stability and your ability to do basic core exercises without pain or additional compensation. It is a great learning tool. Now, as usual, I always state I have no connection to this company, so they didn't give me this for free. I bought it. But I will include a link to it below if you want to get a special offer for this as a result of watching to this video here. So click on the link to get access to that. And of course, soon around the corner here, I'm going to give you some additional videos to teach you how to utilize this tool to your best ability to get maximum results out of it. So thank you so much for watching. Any questions, comments, post them below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can check out future videos on this topic and a lot of other different topics, including reviews. So, Sam Visnick here. Thanks for watching.